Thank you, sweetie. But you could come do an arts and crafts here. You could do whatever you'd like. And you could come sit right next to me. You haven't done anything outside of the.
Hello.
Hey, how are you? I'm waiting for the other people to log in and then you'll be all set. There we go. Matt says, hang tight, I'll be right there.
There he is.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you all just fine.
All right. Can you turn that volume up a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
Excellent.
I better not be touching that.
All right. Thank you.
Like that better.
Hi, Chris. Hi, everyone. Can you hear and see us?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. So we appreciate it, Chris. We have everyone here. So let's stand and say the pledge. We'll get going. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag, the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, and justice for all.
So we have Chris Cushel here from Fisher and Associates. He is going to walk us through second phase of or second version of the drafts we were expecting at the end of last month. So he had provided that. I posted to our Google site. I was hoping we could start reading it, adding comments. I haven't seen any in there, but that's okay. Per Chris's last email, he's going to give us to the end of the month to provide our commentary. It says turn up volume. Oh, turn up the volume here. If you're not hearing anything, turn up volume. And then he's going to, well, I'll let Chris explain, but he's going to expect our comments in the draft by the end of the month.
Hear us.
Can you still hear us, Chris?
You're loud and clear, yeah.
Okay. And so he's gonna take a few days and turn that draft around back to us, and then we'll go from there. So Chris, if you wanna take it on over and kind of walk us through the next phase of the zoning documents, and then kind of pose any issues or items that you would like Zach to opine on, help you out with.
Okay, sure. Well, I'll take a few minutes first just to sort of talk through. So as Matt said first, our general thinking was if you spend the next couple of weeks providing any comments, I think the method that we had last time that Matt had set up by having everyone put their comments into the Google Doc, I thought it was really effective. I thought it was just really helpful for me to see the comments, and then gave me time to sort of reflect on them and then update as applicable. So I think if we do that same method again, that would work well. We received a lot of comments on the sort of what we're calling that phase one, which was great. And one of the documents that I had sent to Matt, which I know has been re-uploaded, was the original phase one comments document from you all, with then my responses of how we addressed them, or if we didn't address them, why that was. And I'll do the same for this what we're calling, I guess, phase two. The general thought was, if you can have the comments by the end of this month, then that will give us about 2 weeks before I head out of country for a couple of weeks, so that you would have that prior to my leaving. So that was sort of why we put those dates, and I just leave it up to Matt if you all want to adjust them. But if everyone's comfortable with that, then we'll kind of assume that that's the way that we're going to proceed. So just as a kind of a reminder of sort of the general flow then and what has been done. So there's Article 1 is sort of a kind of boilerplate type of thing. Article 2 is the definitions. So we've revised definitions, which included a lot of removing existing definitions that just aren't relevant. There were also a lot of definitions that were strange, and I think people caught that the first time around, and I think maybe some of the people thought that those were from us, and it was actually what's in your existing code. And so we've removed some of those kind of funny things. Like one of them was, for example, counting a basement as a story or something, which isn't really standard, for example. So the other change here is my original thought was we would separate definitions that related to the uses from definitions from other types of general definitions. But some of the feedback from the ZAC from multiple people was they preferred everything to sort of be together. And so that's what we've done. So now we've eliminated the use definitions from a separate section and just put it all together.
Can you share that document while you're walking us through? Is that possible?
Sure. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Let's see. Okay. Are you seeing the document right now? Showing some definitions?
We are. If you just want to zoom in and make it a little bigger for us, please.
All right.
Thank you.
Zoom here. Is that better?
Right in there.
More?
A little bit. There we go. That's a little
You
better.
do need glasses, don't you, Matt?
Oh, I'm getting there.
I mean, I can see
Yeah,
that.
I can see it, but I'm curious about everybody in the back too.
This is the most that it is letting me zoom in on Google Docs. So I think this
That'll
is
work.
what you can do. I think you can also zoom it on your end, zoom in on the screen, I think, if you need to.
Yep.
So I'm just going to scroll through then. So these are all the definitions. So then Article 3, we talk about the districts. The other thing I just want to note is when there was the uploading from the Word document to Google Doc, there was a little bit of formatting issues. So just don't worry about that. We'll clean all that up. Something got somehow messed up. I don't know if the fonts are slightly different. So like, for example, this Article 3 should be on the next page, and it is in the kind of the source document.
Okay.
So here's where we talk about the various districts. What we tried to do was it largely follows what you saw from the public forum, which largely tried to follow the land use vision map from the comprehensive plan. Today, I think the most significant change was that today in your code, you really only have one R1 district, one residential district that kind of covers almost everything. And so we wanted to break that up by neighborhoods. One of the things we found was when we did that, now you had too many districts in our opinion. And so we then looked, and a lot of those different areas were substantially, at least from a zoning perspective, very similar. So then we ended up kind of combining them, some of those a bit. And even today, the districts are quite similar, I think. But I think this helps set up a framework so that in the future, if, for example, one neighborhood wants to have some difference that from a different neighborhood, it's kind of set up. And I think that's the other point to this code in general that I just want to emphasize is this isn't intended to be something where you adopt this and you don't need to make any adjustments for the next 20 years. It's intended to create a framework so that as changes occur over the next few years, you're able to make adjustments in a sort of logical and hopefully relatively easy fashion. A lot of these districts, even if the names changed, the boundaries and the characteristics really don't change much from what you have today. There was no intent to, as again, following from the comprehensive plan, there was not any sort of revolutionary change in Boston Spa. I think generally speaking, people like what is there. We made some changes though, like calling it the CBD, we're proposing to change it just to the downtown, which is a little bit more modern way of talking about that area. So this article is relatively boilerplate, except for, I'm expecting to get feedback from you all, both in terms of names. I sent separately the map, so where those boundaries are could change as well, depending on your feedback. So that's the type of information I'm hoping I will get. Article 4 now is where we're starting to get really into the meat of the document. And again, this is where I'm just expecting to get a lot of feedback from you all. If you might have some tonight, but I'm hoping you'll take the time to look more deeply and then provide your comments directly in the document. So the way it's set up is first we talk about your residential districts. We try to put a purpose here. So again, you might have comments on what the actual description of the residential districts is. It largely follows a bit from what we put forth in the public forum, but I think you all will have some good comments for this, which doesn't really, I will say, it's this type of thing. It's important, but it's not really changing the actual regulations themselves. So, please do provide feedback, but I wouldn't get too bogged down in all of this aspect. Whereas I think this here, where we have the actual standards, this is very important. And because now we're separating the residential districts into multiple districts, we have the opportunity not to have it be so one size fits all like there is today. That being said, it largely follows what's there today. We didn't, for example, mess with or adjust anything with like the heights. We just kind of assume if you all are not having issues with the heights in your residential districts, they're probably appropriate, but I don't know that. So if you are, or if a certain neighborhood, you feel like, hey, this neighborhood is all, I'm just making this up, but if you thought it's all ranch homes and we want to preserve that, it might be a lower maximum height than a different district. So one thing that has changed, the minimum lot area is one thing, for example. Our understanding was that there were a lot of issues where the existing minimum lot size is too big and it's not reflective of what you have today, and that causes issues with nonconformities. So we took the spreadsheet that Anna had provided, and we grouped all of the parcels based upon these proposed districts. And then we looked at, so that we were capturing, I think we want to capture like 90% of the existing lots. And that's what's reflective in things like the lot area and the width. Things like setback, and the setbacks, we're sort of doing spot checks because there's no sort of set data through GIS for that, but we were able to check a number of them and try to find something that we thought was appropriate. But again, we'll look to you all if there are some adjustments here. We went through that for each of the proposed districts. The residential ones we kind of all combined. The other ones we kept separate. I guess I would note that this area, this Mohican Hill development, is sort of, if you recall, kind of written in a very funny way in your zoning code, is almost written like a planned development district. So what we just did was we put it as an addendum. There could be legal issues. I'm not sure about why you maybe don't want to just get rid of all that text. It would be, we could also just put it right back in here, but it kind of stood out a little bit as just a little odd. So
Hey, Chris,
yes.
can you make a note for our legal to review that, also to opine on that particular one?
Yes, I believe I have that note there. Yes, I put that already. Council would need to weigh in.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. So I know I spent a little bit of time on that. The other thing I would just note in this Article 4, in addition to these dimensional standards, this is also the area where, if applicable, we're including other types of design standards. And I just want to emphasize that these are design standards for new development. It's not for your historic properties, or I know there's obviously a lot of uncertainty with what's going on in the historic district right now. And so that's all a big placeholder. So this is for new development. So in your downtown, in addition to having the description and the purpose and the dimensional standards, then there's a whole table of various design standards that are applicable for the downtown district. In areas where there is a front yard setback for future development, we have standards there essentially saying, like, it's not for parking, it's for sort of active public, like seating, things like that. So again, you'll want to take a look at that and see if it is appropriate. So I'll scroll through the rest of these districts because it's the same general format. This article has for the PDD, which I know has been quite controversial in terms of people's opinions on it. I did receive a lot of comments from phase 1 about some of the issues, and so this version addresses, to the extent possible, as many of those as possible. For example, there was a concern that there was no minimum size in the previous version. Now there is one. There was tightening up some of the other language as it relates to uses and design. I know there's some thoughts about whether there should even be a PDD included. And I think the idea at this point is we're going to provide this to the village board, and ultimately the board's the decision makers. And you know, if they want this provision removed, it's obviously easy to delete it later on. A new thing we included was residential cluster development. I think there was a little bit of discussion about this. It's essentially opportunities for sort of allowing clustered like cottages on some larger properties. There could be some opportunities for that. I know the planning board thinks that this would be something valuable to have. So this has the uses, the standards, the density, all of that. I think, again, this is something for people to look closely at and see if there are specifics that you think should be tweaked, or if you have questions that I should be addressing for the next round. So those are the districts, and now we go into the uses. So the districts talk about basically sort of what it's going to look like, essentially. Now it's the uses that apply within each of those districts. So we've revised fairly significantly the table of uses, both in format and in content. So I think the general idea with these types of table of uses, which the village has already done a pretty good job of, was not being so overly specific for every single use, because uses are changing all the times and you can't capture all of them. So some communities I've seen will list a dozen different retail establishments as opposed to just saying retail. And so I think, you know, my opinion is it's best to keep it as simple as possible. And if there is some specific type of retail that you want to regulate differently, because let's say it has a different traffic impact or whatever the land use impact might be, then we kind of separate that out later on. So what I would ask for this is for everyone to look at this and think about our uses missing that aren't captured here that you either have in the village or you expect to have in the village or you would like to see in the village. That's one thing. So we would add a row. It's also important to look at what we have proposed is allowed or disallowed in the various districts and see if there should be changes there. We worked from your existing table of uses. So we're not putting any dramatic changes from what's there today. It mirrors it very similarly, but you could have changes. So that's something that we'll want to know. I know one of the comments was you just want to ban mobile homes. That came from one of the comments from the ZAC. So that's where it is here. It's just a line here. So we don't even need a whole section. We're just saying it's prohibited because that's what how you've directed it. So then after the uses, the use table, this next section are standards that are applicable to certain uses. So certain uses might have additional standards that you might want. And again, the idea is that this is a framework so we can add new uses or new standards for uses as they arise in the future. So starting off mixed use development is something that you probably want to talk a little bit more about what does that mean when you say mixed use. And I would submit that we want to draw a distinction of mixed use development in different parts of your community, because in your downtown, that might be different from along your highway business. And there's use standards. Again, some of these you have today, some of them were new and borrowed. Like I think there was a comment from the ZAC about wanting some standards as it relates to the climate controlled self-storage facilities. So we've included that, and that's something that I don't think you have in your existing zoning code.
Prohibit them.
Essentially banning them in back.
I'm sorry, if you're speaking, I can't hear.
No, we just said we want them banned. No self-storage units in the village.
Oh, okay. I mean, if that's the kind of comment then I didn't
Yeah,
notice.
yeah,
I can
we'll
update
yeah.
that.
We're just kibitzing on the side here.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So that's this section is the standards. Article 6 is site development standards. This is I would say relatively boilerplate types of things. However, my one concern, or I guess to think about, and I think this is really for the people that would be regulating this, which is the building inspector, and I'm going to be meeting with him next week, is if we're going to have all these regulations, they need to be enforced or able to be enforced. And so I don't know if there's more here than the village wants to kind of have on the books. So it's something for you all to look at.
Do we lose you, Chris?
Looks like blue froze. Yeah, that happens here.
Hi, Jen. Can you hear us, Jen?
I can hear you guys fine. He
It's
seemed
Chris.
to freeze and then disappear, so I'm just not sure where he went.
Yeah, he got booted. Give him another 30 seconds. He'll be back.
Okay.
Probably has to time out. He's got to dial back in.
So what was the comment you wanted to make about self-storage facility, climate control?
We had in
Ban.
our discussions, we wanted them banned from not included.
Yeah.
In the village, within the village limits.
Or the same as mobile homes, just ban them.
That's right.
That'll leave no question.
Wondering if laptop.
That is a good possibility. I do that a lot too.
Yeah.
Keep working, and then it's I don't know.
What happened? What happened? Yeah, I can hear you. What happened?
We screen of down.
Okay,
Working something bad.
that's okay. We'll be here waiting for you. No worries. We thank the heads up. So it's Windows. It happens from time to time.
Just put on, so hopefully it's appear out.
Yep, no worries. We'll be here. Thanks. Screens of death used to be common a lot. It's typically indicative of a hardware issue or a driver issue.
Notice them now coming up more often with shared video cards or like you're using multiple monitors. It'll take
Hardware
out,
drivers,
yeah,
right?
because they share the RAM. Now your video is sharing your main memory, so if something gets gnarly, they'll just back it all the way up.
Nope, probably good.
This one, it's a gamer's problem, right?
Well, it used to be,
Used to be.
everyone's problem.
Yeah, but now work from home and everybody's got multiple monitors and
Yeah.
it's becoming more popular these days to do that.
That's right. I'll put the comment in about the storage facility.
Okay.
Are you putting them right into the draft already, Darvin? Yep. Oh, nice.
Thank you, Don.
So I think this is small volumes of stuff.
So he had two questions for us, actually. We had asked in our group on home occupations and retail use in central business zone. And we had asked to expand the titles, and he said it was unclear what that meant. And I found it. What's listed in our code is either not enough. We have vital human services, offices by special permit, churches and houses of religious worship, libraries, museum, hotels, banks, and financial institution, and parking garages. And things have changed so much, those aren't necessarily all current. But if that comes up, was our thinking. Okay.
In the uses table.
It was in the code,
Yeah.
in the uses, yeah, or 205.55, retail use in central business zone.
Hello.
Now, I'm here, but I need to be promoted to the panelist.
Hey, Jen.
Oh, here we go. Looks like it's happening.
All right, thank you.
And also in home occupations, we asked to millinery.
There we go.
Whatever, not relevant anymore.
So if he
Hat
doesn't
making.
address any of those,
Seamstresses, tailoring,
But, yeah,
you
but
know, home businesses that are low scale.
so if Chris doesn't address them by the end of the draft, maybe we can just reiterate here or an email back to him.
But yeah, he just had those questions and I scrambled, my brain worked, and I found it.
Great, let's great when it works. Hi, Chris, we can see you.
Okay, sorry, I don't know why my computer just, of course, chose now to crash.
That's okay. Welcome back.
I
I believe we were on Article 5.
Yeah, I think it was articles. I think we had got to Article 6. Can you see the screen? We're talking about site development standards. I was just starting. And I was noting that this is where, again, there might be more than you want to regulate here. So to take a look through it. So then Article 7 is parking. So again, look through the parking standards. We didn't deviate too much from what's there today, but we tried to match it a little bit, and there is some changes as well. And I put a note here that there was a memo that was done in several years ago with some recommendations for the central business district, which I just received, so I haven't reviewed those yet, but I'll take a look at those and I can update as applicable. Article 8 is signs. This has been completely replaced, again, based upon the comments from, in particular, Rory, who has to deal with this as part of the planning board very regularly. So we've kind of taken a precedent and then tried to make it specific for Boston Spa, and so that's what's in Article 8. And I would just note, I think I put a note somewhere within this article, but signs is very sort of a fraught area to regulate. And I just want to kind of keep that in mind because there's a whole host of First Amendment issues that have been settled recently, fairly recently by the Supreme Court in terms of, regulating the sign itself, but not the content of the sign, and not treating different types of content differently in most cases. So just, I guess my point is to sort of tread lightly, and there's only a few firms really nationally that truly have a deep level of expertise. And so most firms tend to rely on precedents from other communities, at least as a starting point. So that's signs. And then I think after that, all of this from Article 9 to the end were pieces that you saw in phase 1. So there have been changes from phase 1 based upon your comments. And then, as I noted before, I know the Historic District Commission is something that is being, I guess, negotiated or discussed among others. So it's just a placeholder for that. So that's the whole flow of it. I guess in terms of, Matt, your second question of, where am I looking for feedback? I mean, obviously I'm looking for feedback everywhere, but I think a lot of that isn't going to come from tonight. I think the one area that I thought would be helpful to discuss relates to accessory dwelling units, if people thought that was a worthy topic to bring up. And then I can, if you all have either some questions or some comments that you want me to know of, we can hear those. Does that make sense, Matt?
Yeah, that makes sense. What specifically on ADUs would you like to talk about?
Yeah, so I think everybody, I assume everyone on this committee knows what an ADU is. And, often they tend to be very controversial in certain communities, or at least among certain people within the community. And so there's a whole host of ways to regulate them. And I think so there are several things that I wanted to, and I'm just going to stop sharing my screen because I don't think it's necessary at the moment. And I can put it back up if needed. If you want to look at the ADU section, I can find that and put it up. So one question is, so there's different types of ADUs. So there are ADUs that are within the home, the primary residence itself. So that's something where maybe you have it in a basement apartment, for example. There are also detached ADUs. Now, when we talk about detached ADUs, it could be like your carriage house that you already have, and you convert that into an accessory dwelling unit. It could also be a new structure that is built. So one of the questions is, do you want to restrict the type of ADU in some way? The second question that I have then is, do you want to restrict, usually, we want to ensure that this isn't a de facto just 2-family home. We want it to be accessory if it's truly an accessory dwelling unit. So we often, and what I have in the current draft is a limit on size. I think I have a limit of 1,000 square feet. I also have it limited to a single bedroom, but all of those are up for discussion depending on how the ZAC, again, how stringently the ZAC wants to regulate it.
What do you see in other municipalities, Chris? I mean, when you just said limit it to 1 bedroom and 1,000 square feet, I mean, that automatically sounds good to me, because if it's an accessory dwelling unit, it's generally for in-law, and they shouldn't need more than 1 bedroom.
Yeah, and that's, again, the size itself can change. I've also seen 800 square feet. I've seen it as a percentage of the principal structure, but that, I don't know. If you have a 4,000 square foot home, that you could still have, depending on what that percentage is, you could still have a gigantic ADU, and I'm not sure that that's, I'd prefer just to go by size. So
How do you
that's
spend
what
any down the road after the original owner has either bought or sold it or built it and moved on? How do you prevent that ADU from becoming another outside rental?
Yeah.
Like a multi-family house, a multi-family unit now, multi-unit dwelling. How does that work? I don't even know how it works.
Yeah, so, well, one thing is it's always going to be associated with the owner. Oh, so one way that you could do it is, and again, it gets a little tricky, Matt, to be honest, because of some certain concerns as it relates to again, just some different various laws, but you can say that at least the principal owner has to live on site. So whether it's in the ADU or the principal structure, that would be one way to ensure that this doesn't just become like a two unit, apartment building essentially. So that's one thing I've seen.
Chris, you have already given us a proposed definition for an ADU. Right? I mean, you told us not to look at the definitions, but it's already in there. It's the first definition in Article 2. And it does say a single family dwelling, either internal to the dwelling or detached from the dwelling. Did you really mean to limit it to just those properties in the village that are single family?
So it's another question. So again, this is up to the village, how you want to regulate it. I have seen a lot of communities don't want, if you already have a 2-family, well, then you have a 2-family. They don't want it to become a 3-family. So we can adjust this definition. But it's however you want to, it's sort of how, I don't know what the right word is, loose you want to be with it. If you have a 4-unit building today on a property, and then you're allowed to do an ADU, then you're going to have 5 units. I personally have no issue with it, but it is something that others might have concern with, especially if it's in a single family, what is an otherwise single family district.
Well, we have a lot of larger, older homes that are already 2-family.
Yeah.
Like contained within that one structure. And so, I mean, we still need to have a conversation about that. So
that's what we're doing. We're having that conversation. So that's why I'm asking, like, if again, people have strong opinions or any opinion, some communities feel like if you already have a 2-family, then that's kind of it. Others don't have that issue, and they want to allow an ADU on any property as long as it meets. Again, there still has setbacks or lot coverage and all that. It still has to meet all that. It's really there's no right answer here.
right.
So on the accessory, I put in the Google Doc, I just put a comment, so Zach members to provide any additional definitions or restrictions that we want to put to that answer Chris' specific question. We put that there. And that was our definition in 2.2.
Yeah, and it's so that's where the definition is, and obviously that we can adjust the definition as needed. And then within the use standards section, so after the use table, there's a section on ADUs with the specific standards that would apply to them. And so this again is where people can take a look at that. I guess the other piece is in the table of uses, what you'd want to look at is A, where are they allowed? Are they allowed everywhere? B, is it through a special permit process, or is it just permitted if they meet the various provisions and standards? I personally would love for things to be by right, permitted if it meets all of the requirements. I think that's a best practice. But other communities, especially around ADUs, feel like they want to have a lot of control over it. And it could be different for different districts as well.
So this is probably a kind of a silly question, but so somebody comes to us and says, we've got a carriage house. My mother's old. I want my mom and dad to move in there. They do that. They both pass away. Then what? Then they can just rent that to anybody they want because it's an approved ADU? Or is that where we can put regulations in saying, number one, or like if it's been vacant for a year, or if you've passed, they passed away, you're done?
I mean, typically, again, I think a community can do it however you want. It is considered a best practice, even though we say it's for like your elderly mother, it doesn't have to be. And I guess that is a question, if somebody's renting it, and I think there's a distinction between I'm gonna rent it to someone who needs a home versus I'm gonna rent it out as an Airbnb, and so it's gonna be different people every day of the week. So I think that's where there's a distinction of if you have an ADU and it's a, you know, there, it's approved as such, it shouldn't really matter who is living within it. And again, this is sort of my opinion. So again, we can write it however you all want. I'm just, you know, telling you how I would treat it myself.
All right, thanks, Chris. Any other topics you want us specifically to opine on?
That's the biggest one. Short-term rentals was also, I had a placeholder. I know there's been, you know, I know there's some state legislation that is kind of going through the adoption right now. My understanding from that is that mostly has to do with how you sort of track it and tax it. And it's still up to the community on whether you actually want to allow them. And they're probably being allowed, you know, I think it's going to be classified as a commercial use. Do you want to allow it? And if so, what restrictions? I will just note, it's not necessarily clear that that should be regulated through the zoning code as opposed to some other part of your code. But that's another sort of placeholder we have right now.
Wait, can you say that last part again?
Yeah, I said it's not 100% clear whether short-term rentals should be regulated through the zoning code as opposed to one of your other parts of your municipal code. And I think that's something that maybe council would want to weigh in on where the most appropriate place is.
Understood, thank you.
And City of Saratoga just passed new term rental issues because of the affordable housing. They limited the amount of days that you can do it and the areas that you're allowed to. And similar to the state law that was signed by the governor. And I have an article all about it.
If they're regulating where short-term rentals can be in Saratoga, there's likely to be overflow into surrounding communities of people looking for short-term rental.
Correct.
Remember, and you know, this was mentioned before a previous meeting, there's been short-term rentals in this area for decades. You know, with various industries, Navy students, instructors coming into the community, renting a room, you know, for a brief period of time and moving on. So we have a long-term history of something like that happening regardless.
Yeah, and Saratoga, I believe, also talked about long-term. Because people were just renting out their homes and not considering it as a rental, but for months at a time. And like they limited it to 150 days per year that they could do it. And some other regulations because they had the same issue of vandalism, parties, trashing properties, and they don't have any recourse. So they're trying to limit it, and again, affordable housing.
Any other topics, Chris, before we start peppering you with questions?
No.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Chris? Where do you want to start?
I would just like to start with the question that you posed about when should we roll this out? And my preference is that we do it sooner rather than later. And in fact, you asked if it should be rolled out in February. February 15th would be my recommendation. I think the proposal of only 2 weeks for the public looking at the draft is not enough time for the public. And I'd just like to propose that we look at February 15th going live on the village website with that information so people have more time prior to the second public workshop.
But Chris did say he's gonna be out of the country for a couple of weeks coming up here.
Right. He could say he would finish by the 14th of February, incorporating our comments. And even if it's still draft, I think we have to give the public more opportunity to look at that rather than less opportunity. Otherwise, I think we're not going to get a welcome reception at our March meeting. which is March 20th, our public workshop. You know, and you have said you are going to do an overview, and I'm assuming a similar PowerPoint like you did last time. Hitting the highlights in front of the group and then mainly questions and answers from the public.
Yep, that is the plan for that March meeting. And this is really a decision up to you all. I mean, it will be ready. You know, if you feel like at that point it's ready to go to the public, the alternative would be you take the 2 weeks for you all internally to look at it one more time before it goes to the public. But this is not my call here. I think not many people, I think it's gonna be a very discrete group of people, probably most of the people in this room right now, that are actually going to read this and look closely at this code, especially ahead of time. But I'm, again, for the transparency, if you want to post it, I personally have no issue with that. It's up to you.
So, so Chris, when is this draft going to be turned around and ready for possible public revealing?
So I think the idea is if I get all the comments by the end of this month, that gives us, I mean, it depends on the extent of the comments, but depending on what it is, I'm hoping, I mean, I will plan to, within those 2 weeks, to turn it around. If there's not too many comments, then it could be quicker, but I feel like I need to have those 2 weeks before I leave and then send it to you for you to post it how you want.
All right, so walking through that, all right, well, let's break this down. So what would be the deadline you would get us a draft that you would be comfortable sending to the public? The 14th of April?
March.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
February, not April. I say April. It's February. I'm looking at February.
If you're giving me till April, man, I'll take it.
No.
Yes,
February 14th, would that-
February 14th, yes.
And so are we, then second part is, are we comfortable having that posted right after that?
I think we should look at it
Yeah.
again before it's posted.
Well,
Definitely.
nothing can happen to it because Chris will be out of the country for 2 weeks.
Able to make any
Changes.
Didn't we talk about one time, sending out a survey to the property owners regarding especially what are their thoughts on ADUs and where they thought ADUs and short-term rentals would be allowed? I think we talked about that near the beginning, that we were gonna send something out to the public.
I think we did. I thought that was
Okay.
something that Mayor Rossi had said the village was gonna be doing, but I haven't really.
I haven't heard either.
I mean, it almost makes sense instead of, that should be done sooner than later.
The reason
And-
why it's delayed for the next week is that there's state's regulations changed the game with the short-term rentals and surcharges. And we're trying to evaluate what that is before we issue it. So it will change the next meeting.
Yeah, but just to get an idea of what the public thinks, like, you know, Colonial Hills, we may get 45 responses saying, oh my gosh, no ADUs. Whereas 50 people down in the village may say, oh yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, but we as a ZAC may say no ADUs in Colonial Hills. So, I mean, I don't think it's a deal breaker. I'd rather see the draft get to the public sooner rather than just 2 weeks before the March 20th workshop.
So in lieu of a survey,
March
the
20th.
feedback would come.
March 20th
March 20th.
and after.
The feedback would come to us as soon as that draft is made public.
Yeah.
So that said, like, the people can opine on ADUs anyway, but it wouldn't be specifically targeted towards it. The draft is out there. People want to comment ADUs, they will.
Right.
I guess my question is, if we do want to make this public, or whenever we make it public, how do you want to handle commentary, Chris? Because we may get dribs and drabs, we may get, you know, a few minorities swamping you with things. How would you like to best handle public input?
Yeah, that's a good question, Matt. I mean, I'm fine if people want to email me directly, and I'll just kind of compile it all and I'll keep it all and you'll have it. You know, we don't have a,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes a lot of times the client is the one that kind of has everything filtered through them, but you don't have a village planner, so I don't want to put that onus on anyone. If if the village is able to create, it's kind of like a dummy email, you know, like a, you know, zoning at Boston Spa kind of thing, and all feedback goes to that. That's an option.
Going that way. So, but how about maybe there's a form we can fill, because I know on the village website, there's a form if you want to apply to be on any of these committees, there's a form. Something along that technology where, you know, you submit your stuff and then you have a place you can put your information in and your opinions and sections and things like that. That's basically essentially just a database, and then it's it's categorized and cataloged, and it's retained for us. We can give it to Chris, and it has some type of organization around it.
Yeah.
Just ask people to wait until the workshop rather than creating a mountain of paperwork
But
that
wouldn't you
can't
want-
be.
Now, we would want the iteration, we would want this document refined over time to as much refinement between now and the 20th of March as possible.
But we could, I think we could make a Google form that feeds into our shared drive right now. And we could set
Right, a
separate
Google
permissions
form.
for that.
Yeah.
So
We mean you, Jared?
one of us.
Okay.
Either me or Matt.
Yeah, like,
Yeah, what it
Like
do then is like, rather than type out all of your comments, you get little sections that say, hey. Address, if we want to collect all that information.
and then, on the back end, it can be showed as a spreadsheet to Chris saying,
Exactly.
oh, this person opined on this section, and this is his opinion, and it's very organized for him.
Yeah, I like that.
I kind of feel like we need to look at it first before Chris sees it, so maybe we can answer those questions, or there's some of our questions before that Chris gets them.
Yeah, we
Yeah, he's
could,
not even gonna see it though, because he's gonna be out of the country from the 15th of February until March 6th. So, you know.
So my question is, what are we gonna do with the comments?
We could-
Ultimately, Chris has to take them and put them in.
Right, but some of them, if they're just outlandish, then they don't get,
Well, they'll
taken
come,
Hey,
seriously.
not
they'll
us,
come to the ZAC and we'll discuss them as some part of the agenda. and then-
and to do what with?
And develop some sort of consensus on whatever is proposed for a change.
Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea?
Yeah.
Is it, we didn't think about, it, we thought of it?
or similarly, we can, you know. Organize and collate the feedback. So if we're getting, here, 30 people who sent an ADU, we can categorize it in a spreadsheet. So it's easily filterable from there. It's say, here's all the comments on ADUs, here are all the similar comments on ADUs, here are the unique comments, that sort of thing.
I think we have time to talk about it, since we only really have 10 minutes left in this meeting. If they want to touch on other areas.
Not yet. I think I like the Google form idea. What would you like us to do with this feedback? If we open up to the public, say, on the 14th or the next business day after the 14th, or whenever it can be put on the website right after we get it.
Yeah.
It's
It's not typical that the advisory committee would be sort of the gatekeepers to try to collate and sort of synthesize all of this, all of the public comments that we're going to get. That's typically the consultant's job, and we report it. I mean, you'll see it all the raw data, but I don't think you need to
fine.
take that on. I would just, if you have that Google form, that sounds like an awesome manner, and it'll be very clear. You know, a lot of these comments, you know, depending on what they are, you know, some things will be, I think somebody mentioned outlandish, some will be really good comments. It's going to run the gamut. And I think depending, and usually we try to, like, sort of the way with the public forum, we try to tease out the kind of the themes and the things we're hearing. I mean, comments aren't a vote per se, right? It's not like just because we got 10 comments means we have to do this, because it might just be the 10 people that decided to send in an email, or because they got their friends to send in the email.
All right, I like that. How about, Karen, I'll talk to you about creating a form, and we do that. And then before we make it public, it should go public once the document's posted and there's some announcements. I think internally for the ZAC, maybe we can opine on the form itself, make sure the form looks like this is the type of feedback we want to put out there to the public and ask for.
So we want to have a form, we probably want to have, like, you and I put together a version of it by like start of February.
Yeah, and have
And
it,
share it with everyone.
yeah, and then make the form ready, like we have the right fields identified. And that goes right next on the village website, right next to the draft. So if somebody reads the draft, they can fill out the Google form and it's all right there. I did too.
And that's also good data collect to
Yeah.
have name, address,
Mhm.
email address for the village resident, for other things.
Yeah, and they can get a direct,
We could follow up about the workshop and say.
That's
"You
right,
submitted
that's
comments,
right.
Please come
Right.
attend our
That's
workshop."
right.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Okay. Chris, any other specific topics? Oh, no, we already did that. Any other topics we have? Sorry. moving along. Anyone else? Now we have Chris's undivided attention.
Well, there are still some gaps in his draft, so could we expect reasonably that those will be filled in before the end of the month?
So the biggest gap again is the Historic Commission, so you cannot expect anything until I receive something, so that's the main thing. Other gaps, there were some very frankly minor placeholders for diagrams and things like that, so we're kind of chipping away at them, but they're really not substantive things. If there are specific other gaps, maybe you can let me know what those are, because I just can't think of what they are off the top of my head.
So you made reference to, correct me if I'm wrong, changes to the zoning map. You could talk a little bit about that, or maybe I read that email incorrectly.
Yes, there are significant changes and that this was what we showed at the public forum. So part of it is you had your comprehensive plan and we're trying to align the zoning districts with that. So the main thing, like I said, was changes to the residential districts, the boundaries so that there's more districts. There are not changes, there's changes to the name of something like, for example, the CBD to the downtown, but there was not really changes, or at least very minimal changes to any boundaries. So the boundaries for the most part are tracking what you have today. But again, it's something that the ZAC members should look at and see if we got it right or not.
Mhm.
Yeah, Article 3, Article 4, Article 5 are the big ones you want us to focus in on to provide commentary.
It's really the meat of the code. I mean, we received tons of comments on what I call the phase 1, which for the most part, not only, but that was in large part procedural and process. But this is where I'm really expecting and need feedback because you guys know your community best.
Yeah,
I
we'll
will
start.
just note, I mean, there's no intent to have any sort of drastic change in the community. So we're trying to, keep the same type of development that you have and uses that you have today.
I have specific questions about open space, where they fit in. Open spaces, like parks and such like that.
Yeah, that was a discussion back in December.
No, that was 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there was, a question that I had previously raised about, and I saw Marilyn had sent a detailed email with her opinion. And at one of your recent ZAC meetings, you discussed the concept of an open space district. And my understanding was that there was no consensus from the group. I think then, this is something therefore that really the village board can opine if they want to have that district. I think everybody here, I hope, really values public open space. And I don't think that's sort of the question. I think the question is, is a zoning district, an open space zoning district, the best way to preserve that? And I'm not convinced it is. There are a number of communities that do have open space districts. There's not a whole lot, to be honest. But all the ones that do, they're relatively new, I'd say within the past 5 years for the most part. So I think the jury's still out on whether it's actually effective in preserving open space. I mean, I don't know if Boston Spa has sort of concerns where your current parks or parkland they're being lost to development. But I would submit that maybe you don't need to solve a problem that doesn't exist, I guess, is sort of where I would lean toward.
Have open space that's not designated as park space. And if the school were to sell it, there's nothing to stop it from being developed. So it's almost like a protection for places that aren't designated park space.
Mm-hmm.
And it also includes cemeteries.
Cemeteries
Which will never be
and the
residential.
Saratoga County Fairgrounds. There's just a need for it to be specific, and the difference between what is municipal. Oh, and Cameron has his hand raised. Municipal and private owned, and school district is municipal. And Cameron may have to add to this.
Yeah, the only thing I had to add, so I think to me, there were two major questions that we wanted to bring back to you with that. One of which was, I think, already addressed here in terms of whether that is necessary for preserving open space. So, I mean, not even for development, but so Wiswall Park doesn't become a parking lot and Kelly Park doesn't become a sewage plant. Not that we think that's going to happen, but I think to me, the one that I think we had maybe less visibility on that you might is whether there are other benefits besides preserving open space in having that district that maybe relate to, and this is where I really don't know what they would be, but maybe related to grant applications, maybe related to other development in the village, being able to say that we have this level of open space in the village. I'm not really sure what those would be, but I was hoping maybe you would have some insight into whether what those would be if there were any at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too much to my knowledge. There could be, again, I'm happy to put in this open space. I'm just afraid it's going to raise a whole can of worms. Like if you have this open space, do we need then different districts for if it's passive open space versus active, like with parks or, you know, a pickleball court or something like that? And then we have to, I'm just not sure that the zoning code is the right way to sort of manage the village's open spaces. I'm happy to do it. And again, I think in my mind, this is maybe a question for the village board, unless the ZAC is sort of 100% consensus. But my understanding from the previous conversations was that there's some different viewpoints on whether it's really needed or not.
I'd like to go with your expertise. You have the experience and you've seen it. Now, if I recall a conversation we had about this specific topic in the fall, we don't regulate them by zoning, we regulate them by use, not districts, but by uses, right? Did we have this conversation already?
So,
That's how it's typically.
Today in your zoning code, your uses today, for example, in your residential district, you specifically have like open space as or parks or something like that. I forget exactly how it's worded, as a use in your zoning code.
But it's not a park, it's not considered a park.
It's not place-based to the areas that we're talking about, which are cemeteries, athletic fields, parks,
The fairgrounds.
pools, kayak landings along and fishing along the Cape Ross. These are all municipal properties and or dedicated properties that are non-residential.
Right. And I guess, again, like I said, I'll do however you want me to do this. It would seem a little odd to me to have like a kayak landing be like a district essentially, you know, like it's just not, it's not standard to do that. But if
What do you recommend, Chris?
I don't have a strong recommendation on this, Matt, to be honest. That's why I had asked the ZAC if you have an opinion on it. I would lean towards saying if it's not necessary to have an open space district. I don't think that it's, I don't think you have an issue where it's helping you right now, is a kind of my opinion on it.
Yes, I just disagree.
We're gonna look ridiculous if the map shows residential use on a cemetery.
Well, let's go put our comments.
It doesn't say residential use, it says residential district. Residential districts have other uses, not just residences. I mean, you might allow solar panels, for example, just as some example. That doesn't mean that it's still a residential district.
Right.
But
So
again, I defer to you all on how to do this. I'm just the consultant. I do what the village wants. That's why, because there's different opinions, that's why I just recommend we just ask the village board for direction on it.
Yeah, so let's do this. I agree. Let's all our comments and we're gonna escalate that to the board to make the decision. This is one of those topics where we can advise, we can recommend, and then the board can decide. Any other topics in here for Chris while we have him here?
More than we have time for. We'll have to do it at another meeting and through our comments.
All right, let's talk about next steps. So Chris, given that you are going, you are traveling next month, when would you be able to meet up with us on Zoom again? Would it be 2/6, 2/20, or 3/6?
Sorry, let me look at my calendar.
And is Chris meeting with the building inspector by Zoom next week? Is that what he said?
Yeah, he said
When is that
I'm
happening?
meeting with him next week by phone, yeah. What about the 13th, maybe? The 6th I'm busy, but a 2/13 I'm around, and that'll be right, when we're at least finishing up the, the final stage of the code, if you want to meet then. I guess the question is, what are we looking to get out of another meeting? Again, I'm hoping I'm gonna get all of a ton of comments within the next 2 weeks, and then me and my staff will be kind of having our heads down trying to complete them prior to 2/15.
Make more sense to meet following our review of the master draft again.
Like on the 20th, February 20th.
They can be traveling back, but before the public workshop, I think it would make sense to.
He has no time because March 6th is our meeting, and that's the day he's getting back. So we have to meet with him.
I can do the 6th. That's fine. I get back the day before. I might be a little tired, but I can do the 6th.
Oh, okay, great.
Okay.
I think
Work.
that'll be, I think the focus really should be, we can talk about the code, but hopefully we're mostly going to be talking about the forum and what we're going to be presenting and how we're going to be promoting outreach and all those aspects to the forum, would be my suggestion.
Yep. Yes, Cameron, go ahead, sir. I see your.
Sure. Can I just ask, maybe I missed this, but I know, Chris, you said a couple of times you're waiting for particular things for the historic district language. I know we got the email, with the recommendations from the commission. Are there particular things, I don't know if, all of you in the room have discussed what we need to do on that. Are there particular steps we need to take before that goes forward, or are we waiting on something else?
Matt, is that a question for you?
Yeah,
or-
I'm
that
not
one.
sure who it's a question. I mean, it's really a question for, I'm not sure if it was discussed and I missed it, or if we're waiting for an outside party, or if it's a discussion we need to have.
That's a good point, Cameron. That it was not discussed. However, and I know John Cromie, he's here in the audience. I'm sure he'll have something to say. But Chris has received the draft. He has received all the language. We've received it all. And at this point, with other topics too, that's just going to be escalated to the board, and we'll have them make final decision on that one. So there's gonna be a few sections in this are either contentious, no consensus, need decisions, and we'll just put that to the board for
We still need to
recommendation.
discuss it. I think that's important that we do that.
what, discuss what? Does
The proposal that's come through on how to make things right with the model landmark preservation local law. Because this is
what would be the goal for discussing?
at the next meeting to have John Cromie, the chair of the Historic District Commission, explain how this entire packet evolved.
For what purpose? Because my point is.
So
if
that
you wanna
we can
extend-
edit the language that Chris still has a placeholder for the historic district.
I say that it's.
I think very similar to Chris just walked us through the draft code. I would be interested to hear John or someone else walk us through his proposal to understand what's the same and what's different from what already exists.
Do we want to sit there and have another meeting to talk through this?
I think it would be worth discussing this, Zach.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we're so far behind now, we need to move forward.
Well, what would be on our agenda for our next meeting if not that, since we're putting our comments into the draft and it's going back to Chris anyways.
I-
So seems like our next meeting is a good opportunity to have that discussion.
And when is that? When is it?
February 30 or February 6th.
Whatever the first February is. The sixth.
Yeah, February 6th. After comments due. Darwin, what say you? Do you want another meeting to talk about this?
Yes,
Okay.
but it needs to be condensed to only changes. So we
I
can know
agree, yeah.
exactly what the deltas are between what was there and what we want to put there now. Because we already know what was there and was creating some.
And what would the goal for discussion? Because I want to be clear that, hang on, I want to be clear that if we're asking, if Chris was asked for a comment back, and that iteration is already gone back, and he won't have time to get the the draft updated with any HDC stuff between now and when he gets back on the 14th to get it published. What would be the, again, what would be the goal and objective for us meeting to discuss for what purpose? For us to
There's
make,
no way he can have it.
To
not.
understand what is in the language that's proposed, that's going, that, I mean, if we're gonna avoid difficult issues, we're not really doing anything. There's something put forward. I'd like to understand it better. If
For what
it's-
purpose? We're not
I
making,
think that was the purpose. The purpose is I'd like to understand what was put forward better. There's language. I would like to hear it explained similar to what was just done. If we're just going to ignore it, I mean, is the objective to just say the zoning advisory committee, it does not intend to advise on the historic commission?
well, it's a contentious topic to the point where I'm hearing that it's going to be handled up by the board, so among other topics, so why not?
It's only contentious if we don't shed some light on what the commission has done over many months to address what everybody's calling, an issue here. This is the proposed solution.
Okay.
And I think we have plenty of time, and I'll step forward to help volunteer to do the edits to the document so that you know what the proposal is. But it's as simple as that, and I think giving John an opportunity to give a report to the ZAC is worthwhile.
Sounds like we have consensus. February 6th is, we want to talk about Stark District Commission.
Should we
Yeah.
ask John if he's available first?
I will be.
Johnson.
Just to clarify, Matt, I received an email forwarded from Mr. Cromie that kind of describes like the logic, but I haven't received the actual document with any language, just so you know. So I don't.
You were on the email that had the document.
Bottom of the.
It was
Uh,
attached. I can go ahead and forward that to you right now if you don't, I mean, it wasn't an attachment, but I'll go ahead and do that right now.
I don't think I've ever received an email from John. I received a response from the mayor, but that response did not have the attachment. I've never received anything from, I'm looking at the email. It says that I was supposed to be copied, but I didn't receive it.
Okay, no worries. I will remedy that and I will send you,
I just forwarded it right now.
all right. Yeah, it was back on Monday. You were on the line, the 2 lines, and there's an attachment there. So if you don't get the one from just let me know if there's another way you want to receive it.
Yeah, well, nothing's come through yet. I just want to make sure we have the right email form.
Okay.
There wasn't, so maybe Matt, just if you want to send it just to make sure.
Yeah, we both sent it, so you should have it.
Okay.
All right, so Chris, you're going to attend which meeting again? The March 6th?
March 6th, yeah.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, hang on one second. We need public comment before we go. So
With
let's
him?
let's keep Chris here because I want to make sure he's here in the trenches with us.
Comment?
Question. Any other comments or any questions we have here at ZAC? We open up to public.
I'm good.
Okay. Anybody have a comment? Any public comment? Cromie, go ahead, sir.
Okay, if the proposed draft was sent out in the middle of February for public comment, it was going to take probably about a week or so for people to actually get into it and be able to make comments, which means almost all of the comments are going to be coming right before right in the beginning of March or the second week of March, would be very difficult for anything to be categorized by at that time. I would suggest that you take, you're looking at about 8 people who might be making comments right now, and it's probably not going to change that much. Put it out, make it public right now, so that the Chris can take in the comments when they come in. It won't be as compressed for them as it would be otherwise. Because logistically, it makes far more sense. Make it public. Let the people start making the comments right now, getting the Google thing set up so they can make their comments, and it'll make his life a lot easier and everybody else, because the more people you have looking at something, the more likely that things will be caught, and people will be less upset when the time comes to have it. Okay, so I would suggest you should make it. Just open it with us.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
I would just second what John said, because I don't see any reason why it couldn't be made public now. I mean, it is a public document. Forcing people to go through a FOIL to get it, it's just putting delays on it and for no reason. So I would support the idea that it just should be made public and available on request.
Thank you. Any other comments? Karen?
Just a couple of things, like you guys talked about, you didn't want storage facilities, that was a comment that was made. And there already is storage facilities in the village, so I think it just needs to be, like, where you're gonna go with that at this point in time of storage facility part of the village. And then I know one of the last meetings, and maybe I missed a meeting in between, I wasn't sure. I know Rory was gonna look at some of the buildings that are, like, I know the South Street School was talked about. Big, larger buildings that are not, they're in residential zones, but they're not residential buildings. And he's gonna provide like a list of all those, to talk about what you guys are going to do with that. Maybe there was a meeting between that I might have missed, over the holidays. And
Those were provided to Chris. That list was provided to Chris.
Okay. And I wasn't sure, I didn't see anything with the accessory dwelling units. Like, I heard you like talking about it, but I didn't know if there was specifics, like maybe it depends on the property size. If I have a small property and I have a carriage house and turn it into a accessory dwelling unit, maybe that's different than maybe a larger property that has more land. I don't know, that was just a thought. And then I know there was talks about the PDD. I know it can be contentious because that's been talked about a lot in Malta. And I think those were, and then you guys also brought up short-term rentals, what we talked about. And I know going through Airbnbs and stuff like that, they are turning that into more of like a commercial business and being taxed it's business, and we know that can be might be a situation like you guys talked about. And thank you for everyone and Chris for your time.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Ben.
Hi, Chris. Ben Baskin here. Thanks for working on this. I guess I'm not completely clear on the process through March 20th and beyond. You described the March 20th workshop as you're going to give a presentation on the current draft and you're going to seek questions. And what I was assuming and hoping is that it would be similar to the previous workshop in that you would seek comments at that workshop, so that not all the comments are internet-based, written, but that you'd actually have a community event like we had before. And there's a structure for also receiving actual input, not just questions about it, but actual, this is an opinion I have about the zoning, and then having a process following that workshop to collate and process those comments into the next draft, which I assume will be the last draft before you send it to the village board. So, but that's what I would hope the second workshop would, how it would be integrated into your process. But I haven't heard exactly that yet.
Can we?
That was a misspeaking. We'd absolutely be taking comment.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you. I wasn't sure. So that's a great, that it's not just, written based comments that you're getting. The other thing I'd say is, I encourage you as a member of the village board, I'd encourage you not to necessarily shy away from things that don't have consensus, that are complicated or controversial. I at least am looking for recommendations for you guys, and if you have to have a conversation and you can vote, and the part of the information can be, okay, 4 people wanted this and 3 wanted that, but because 4 wanted it, it's going in or it's coming out. But you should know there was, this minority view. But that's good information for us, rather than punting, admittedly difficult concepts to the board. Have that, and also I would encourage you not just to use a written comment-based feedback, but take more advantage of these meetings and verbally talk about the issues together and where you are, and again, come to a conclusion amongst yourselves at a meeting, like PDDs, figure it out to some degree, ADUs, figure it out, even if it's not a consensus, just communicate, X number wanted this, X number wanted that. I would find that very helpful, rather than just say, here, we weren't sure what to do here, because you do make a choice by not making a choice. Like right now, there is stuff in there about PDs, about ADUs, and that is a choice, whether you're consciously or, specifying that choice or not. So I'd rather you have an actual explicit conversation about it, and what ends up in there is actually what you consciously chose to put in there as a group. So I encourage you to have those conversations.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Liz
Yes,
Clemos, couple things on ADUs, the discussion as to whether they could be used, just for relatives or potentially rented out. One thing to keep in mind, we have a number of elderly people that have big homes and are having a hard time affording to stay in those homes with, taxes, utilities and stuff, and the ability to rent it out. And I concur that it should be owner occupied, because I think that makes the big difference on an ADU. It's not really, but if they could rent it to a university student or someone like that, it brings in a source of income, and it really speaks to what used to happen. People would rent out their homes during the Trek season and pay their taxes with that. So that's one thing. On open space, because not all the open space in this village is owned by the village, I think it makes sense to designate that. I live across the street from the soccer field. I wouldn't like to see that developed into something I'd like to, personally, I'd like to see it open and used. So I think, that's my feeling on that. And then I had a question for Chris. In an adult district, we have one designated. Can you put in zoning allowing other uses like single family, multiple family, retail, etc. in that district, such that somebody could buy a piece of land in the adult district and not do an adult business in this? So that I think that would be okay, because there wasn't much other things, it doesn't force you to put in adult businesses, in other words, does it?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, I can respond to that last comment that yes, that we actually put in a mechanism so that the adult district is sort of an optional, and actually within that is the base, what is called the base zoning, which is the downtown district. And so I think the incentive for any landowner would be to do something that is allowed within the downtown, because that's going to be, just from a market perspective, most likely a lot better. So I think that's how we're going to accomplish that.
That happy to hear that. Thank you.
Any other comments on Zoom or in the room?
I forgot to mention, sorry, that if the document becomes public, it would be great, because I know sometimes it's having more time, like Mr. Crowley said, to be able to read it and digest all the information, and maybe you could just put on their draft, like big drafts. Everyone knows reading it, it's a draft form and not the final version, so you don't have people flying off the handle on Facebook
That's a good
saying
point. Yeah.
comments, stuff like that. So
Yeah.
put big letters on their draft.
Yeah, that's a
Uh,
good point. We should definitely put draft. I also just want to note that it's not, the night of the forum, it doesn't come off. It's going to be on after the forum. I'm seeing the forum as sort of in many ways more of a starting point for the comments, because I think a lot of people will benefit from first having the overview, then being able to go to the document and either look at certain sections that they want. I will just note, I would strongly recommend against putting the current working draft online right now. I think it's not ready, and I think it's going to cause a lot more confusion for people to have something now, as opposed to waiting until March 15th, which still gives over a month for people to review, which is longer than what most of these processes have.
Yeah,
Yes.
February 15th.
Sorry, February 15th is what I meant. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Any other comments?
Just one little suggestion. Could you have a large size map of where the districts are? Because at the last meeting, they were discussing districts, and there was confusion as to where something, where the boundaries are. And I think with the use of this group, if you had a big map showing where these districts are, that would be useful. And of course, at the workshop, definitely. But I just heard the confusion the last meeting, on where something was. Yeah, could we get those printed?
Large format.
I'll make it large.
Oh, thank you, Anna.
Yeah, thank you, Ann.
And could we have those at Village Hall, so that if someone needed to look at something, they could,
I would say not while it's still proposed,
well, could we?
until we're ready to release the document.
Could we bring it to the next meetings?
Yeah.
It's very tough looking at your.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other public comment?
Just a quick thought about this group. I remember we talked on the ADUs were looked upon as the affordable housing that they would prevent or eliminate the need to have low income housing concentrated in one spot. We thought that is not the way our village works. Our village works with a mixture of people all in process, and that it would be detrimental to the whole fabric to have the economic group of people in one location. The ADUs would be all affordable housing.
One last quick comment. The issue of having schools potentially selling land is a good one to think about, because in Boston Lake, the school district actually did that recently for income. They needed the revenue, and they're gonna build houses where there used to be open space. And so that could happen unless, you protect that space somehow.
And just the ADUs and the lower income, there was in the village for the longest time, it was called Lower Malta Avenue, where all our lower income people were housed for many, many years.
Betcha can still be identified.
Ward Street.
From Malta Avenue to Milton Avenue. From Malta Avenue School to Milton
Oh,
Avenue.
yeah, it's still there.
Yeah, it's not, it's better than it used to be.
Oh,
Right.
Yes.
That was really the concentration of condemned housing, for
lower income.
For lower income people, yes.
And then they moved to the.
Any other public comment? Frank, I noticed you're not making any comments. You want to be the odd man out back there? Any comments? No?
One of those moments where I think it more listening and talking. But we are.
Jen, anybody on Zoom?
Jen's asleep. She went.
Jen fell asleep, okay.
No, I'm here. I'm here. It takes me a minute to turn everything back on. The only person who's been on Zoom all night is Karen Avenarius. So unless she has comments, you're good to go.
Okay.
Oh, she's sitting right here, so.
I know. So we were covered.
Ben, thank you so much for your support and help. Chris, we appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thanks.
And, we'll see you guys
Thanks,
later. Thank you.
Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, wait.